Big reveal, big day, big video. What are we doing? Tell them.
We're changing the podcast name.
We're changing the name of everything. Naming is really important. And so we've only done a couple of episodes of this, but we kind of feel like it's time to reorient the direction of the show away from the good life into something that's a little bit more appropriate for the future of this brand. Before I reveal it, though, I want to tell a story because we haven't discussed this in detail yet. You sort of know what happened 2 years ago, but you don't know like everything that happened. So 2 years ago, I walk out of an executive meeting, and the pace of my life is just ridiculous. To put it in perspective, just in case people have not followed along, we had 4 businesses inside of the portfolio, 200 staff, hundreds of thousands of calls happening a month, hundreds of thousands of customers. In fact, people sometimes would, I still play at my church, and one time someone was like, "Hey, can you play for me?" And it was in like San Antonio or something. Like, we're going on a quick tour. And I was like, "No, I can't." And they were like, "What do you mean? What do you do?" Like, you play piano and stuff. And I was like, no, I don't play piano. I like run businesses. It's like, don't get this. I volunteer only at church. Yeah. So it was like a tour opportunity. I was like, I don't have time to go. I can't fly anywhere else. I was in meetings like 6 hours a day. And I hop out of an executive meeting. And, the businesses are doing great, but I was so tired. Like, I was exhausted. You were here, so you remember this. Just what were the differences in my eyes from now to then? Just, I'm curious. I've never asked you this.
You never looked like you slept.
I didn't even look people in the eyes.
You didn't know how to sleep either.
I didn't know how to sleep. That's true. I was fatigued. And this was maybe February. That was about 2 years ago. End of January, 1st of February. And I feel like I was supposed to take a break, like a good long break. And I was like, nah, can't do that. I don't have time. Why take breaks when if you take a break, you go poor? That my mentality was like, I can't rest. I have to. When you grow up poor, and then you work really hard and get rich, you can learn really bad lessons from that. And the lesson for me was like, I've got to strive. I've got to keep going. Like, I can't. And I just kept going. And then a couple months later, it was like, I'm getting sick. I was sick 2 times back to back. And I finally like, okay, fine, I'll listen. Like, I'll take a break. And then the team at the time was like, no, you can't take a break. We need another like 90 days. Second time I skipped that insight. And so I was like, okay, I'll give you another 90 days. I didn't even make it 90 days. I made it 60. And then I was like, guys, I'm going on a 30-day break. Don't talk to me. I'm just out. Like, I've got to take 30 days for like my own, mental headspace and my family. There's a story here we'll unpack later of my daughter who was 3 at the time. She was like, she basically would look me in the eyes and be like, I don't like you. And I'm offended with you because I wasn't spending any time with her. So we do a 30-day sabbatical. And for an entrepreneur, this is like the hardest thing in the world to do. You think it would be fun? Oh, I'm just going to vacation for 30 days. But by like day 3, I was like, yo, I'm worthless. I have nothing to live for. Because my whole identity was wrapped around this idea of production. If you produce, you're valuable. If you don't produce, you're a waste. You're a slave. And I just was like, I'm going to take the full measure of the break. I'm going to go all the way through it. And like a week and a half in, like, God began to speak to me. I began to hear, like, I saw colors again. I was driving one time to Starbucks in the middle of this sabbatical. And I was just like, I've never noticed that there are like trees in Nashville. These are beautiful. Like, what's wrong with me? And this is like what happens to us when we're in this culture of just like go. And when we go too long, we tend to exist at an existential level of the surface. We're only at the very, very top. We don't have time to go any deeper than just like, what can I study in 5 minutes? I've got a 5-minute block or a 30-minute block. And I really started reading. Like, we recorded a video at this time when I was like, I remembered that books are cool and you can read books. And you remember that video right in the living room? Mm-hmm. And you were like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I think I'm just going to like read. maybe.
Yeah.
Because I had gone so long like without having time to do that. And when you look back at the past 2 years, it's been really hard because there have been like lots of challenges that came on the back end. This is the problem with, I just did an episode for Daily Mind Medicine, which is the podcast that you don't listen to anymore. This is great.
So sorry for my betrayal.
I'm just recording for myself, I guess. And I was like, there's two things that really can keep you on the straight and narrow. One is clean thinking and attribution, and the second is directional certainty. But when I say clean thinking and attribution, here's what I mean. The problem with clean thinking today is we are going to pay the cost or reap the rewards of decisions we made years ago. So it gets really confusing to figure out, what am I paying for right now? Like, my life is really hard right now, but I haven't done anything to do it, to make it hard. And we have to go back. We have to look long enough for our attribution to find the tail, where the tail ends. And this is very easy to put in investment terms. If you buy Google right now is really low. So the stock is low. Well, there are people right now buying Google. 10 years from now, they're going to be on interviews and folks are going to be like, how did you know? How did you know to buy Google? Like, why are you so rich? And they're going to have to track back to a decision point. And our life is controlled through our decisions. This is the weighing effect of how choices impact our long-term consequences. And when I look back to the past 2 years was almost like a payoff of sorts of like just the go, go, go mentality. So my fight to get healthy, my fight to like even be able to sit down and articulate my thoughts again. This show is an example of that, because like for 2 years, I've just been like, let's just get in and out 10 minutes and then we're done. And part of that was because there was so much baggage around being busy so long that I was living at the surface.
And when you said clean thinking, is that in contrast as to like the 5 minutes of thinking? Like when you said you needed clean thinking and attribution, what did that mean?
I think muddy thinking is when we don't have the attribution for something. So we get muddy on the attribution. Like what's causing, like if you're in a place right now, like if you're watching this and let's just pick a random example. Let's say you're not happy with the relationships that you have. You're like, I don't know how to find good friends. Well, there's probably a season or a period of life where you have not been a good friend, and therefore you're now sort of paying that cost. But the cost is delayed. So this is Ray Dalio who talks about second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth order consequences, where you have a decision and a consequence. All of the universe pays homage to this cause effect. That's how God made it. It's always going to be that way. But the secret is the effect is always delayed. So if you're enjoying surplus right now, it's likely because you made decisions a long time ago that you're just now reaping the benefit of. And typically the longer, this will get you, this is crazy. The longer the delay, that delay is a multiplier. So the more the upside or the more the downside is. So if you make an investment right now and it pays off in 10 years, it's likely going to be a bigger payoff than if you make an investment now and it pays off tomorrow. Because that delay, all it does is multiply. So gets really important when you're not being a good friend and you go a long time not being a good friend. It's just multiplying the debt attached to not being a good friend. Does that make sense?
It's kind of like when people harbor unforgiveness for so long that they get angry
100%.
and then they become horrible people.
And they're bitter, and it's all the same. Yeah. Same with health. If you like mistreat your body for 10 years, you're not going to probably pop out of that in 3 months. It's going to take you a little bit longer. So we have to know where we are in the middle of everything. It's like a GPS. We have to sort of know where we're at. One of the first things I had to do is I had to go back and find all of those areas, just like with the sabbatical, where I was like, I think I'm supposed to take a break, but I'm not going to. And the longer you do that, you're accruing that interest payment. And as you accrue, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The only way out of this is you have to get deep enough in your thinking about it where you can see it. So you'll have to bring me back down to earth on this, because I don't want to go too esoteric, but in the spiritual, everything is always opposite. So they're mirrored in opposites. In fact, last night on that Zoom we were on, the Old Testament is a mirror of the New Testament, but they're in different realms. So think about it as like you have the grounds right here, you have everything underneath, and then everything above is a mirror. What is a mirror? A mirror is just opposite. It's the same thing flipped around. So when you're looking into a mirror, what you're seeing is you're seeing the opposite effect pointed back at you.
Could you give like a real life example of that?
Yeah. If you want to, we're talking about spiritual principles. So if you want to have a life of abundance and surplus, one of the most guaranteed ways to do that is become a person who's very generous. Well, that's opposite. As you give money, money comes back in. It's a mirror. It's going out, it's coming back in. If you want to have more time freedom, so the control over your time, the easiest, most guaranteed way to do that is you put yourself into an environment where you are of service. And as you are of service, you're donating a portion of your time, and you're going up the totem pole in autonomy as you do that. If you start working for me today, you have less autonomy than if you've worked for me for 10 years. It's a mirror. So, but back to the topic of today, if you think about these opposites, everybody wants to get into like the high places, right? We want positions of power, positions of success. We want positions with authority. And I've done full-on like in-depth studies on authority. The way that you get authority is you are afflicted with the thing that you're wanting to get authority over. This is why I don't pray for patience anymore. And I rarely pray for like more faith either, because like
We haven't even said the name of the podcast yet. This is already.
is it, you like it? You want to keep going? If you pray for faith, here's what's going to happen. God, give me more faith. Okay, he's going to load you onto a boat where you think you're going to die, and then you're going to build faith because you're about to die. That's all throughout the New Testament. If you want to have more patience, you're going to be surrounded by idiots, and you're going to learn how to be patient, through the force function of requiring. It's the same thing. Like, I want more muscle. I want more muscle mass. Okay, here's what you do. If you want to build more muscle, you need to break down and weaken the muscle. Opposite. The mirror effect of breaking down your muscles, tearing the muscles, is that they eventually grow up. So in the spiritual world, you have these people who are spiritually fit. Like, they've got bulk. And you can feel these people. When they walk into a room, you're like, whoa, this person's got authority over something. One of my pastors has like a specific calling to pray for barren wombs. And it's crazy. People come to the church. They've been trying to have kids for a decade, and then they'll have kids. She's got that's authority. There's spiritual authority, authority over certain things. The reason she has that is because she was barren. There's another person that I know really well, and they have a spiritual authority over healing and people who are sick. How does she have that? She had cancer. And this is how it works. How do you tell if somebody is like spiritually fit? They have authority. How do you get authority? You end up wrestling with the thing that you're getting authority over. And when you beat it, you are given a measure of authority over it. Does that make sense? Back to the topic. And everyone wants to get to the high places. They want to get to the places of, you want to be on the mountaintop. But the correlation here is if you want to go high, you first have to go deep, because life is a mirror. And so we're changing the name of the show to reflect that spiritual principle. If you get to the depth of something, it gives you the autonomy, authority, and leverage in the physical world to then get to the high places. So the brand for this show moving forward is going to be called The Deep End, because the deep end is where all the power is. So there's even connotations in this of like, everywhere in Scripture where you look at when God's love and care and everything is explained, there are different adjectives that describe it. In every single one of the adjectives is depth. The depth of God's love, the depth of God's depth everywhere. Because the deeper it is, the higher it is. When you want to build a skyscraper, if the skyscraper is tall, its foundations must be deep. And so you can't build a tall life on shallow foundations. You can only build a tall life on deep foundations. I got a prophetic word a year and a half ago, November of 2022. What was that? Year and a half? Somebody called me out from the just the crowd, like just a random crowd, by name, and it was like a minute and a half word. And one of the things that they said is God wants to build a skyscraper out of your life, 100 stories deep. What? She didn't say skyscraper 100 stories tall. She said a skyscraper 100 stories deep, because that's how it works in the spirit realm. Like everything's opposite. Everything.
You should share how we even got to changing the name in the first place, and this all started last Monday.
Well, you were like, I think we need to change. I'll tell people exactly. Here's exactly how it happened.
Yeah, you do it.
Jake is like, hey, I think we need to change the name. I said, no, Good Life is a great name. Just like so usually how our ideas happen. I'm like, why? Why change something? It's more work. And you're like, no, I really feel like we need to like pray about it. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll pray about it. And then you prayed about it, and you'll have to share the rest of it.
Yeah, I've been praying about it for like the past 4 days. I was like, I just feel like there is a deeper name to this that has more meaning to it.
Deeper name.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic.
Couldn't think of anything. I sat there, I probably sat down for about 45 minutes just brainstorming. I literally couldn't think of anything. I was like, all right, well, you got to have a God idea for it to be a good idea. And so I just sat in his presence on Sunday morning. We got done with church. I was driving home. Literally, I was singing a song out loud, and then out of nowhere, like I got punched out of left field. It's like the deep end. And I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah, you told me. I was like, oh, well, this actually follows the kind of the spiritual terrain of how things happen. Like the topography of the spirit is always flipped upside down. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, because if you have a mountain that's 1,000 meters high, the spirit realm is 1,000 meters deep, because it's this mirror. So the deeper we go, the higher we can ultimately ascend. And so I think that clarity and command and control and power comes from this idea of being able to spend the necessary time to explore. There's also something in the human spirit that's an explorer. So if you're free, you have a drive to explore. This would be an interesting experiment for a second, just for if you're watching this and you're like, how do I know if I'm operating in a place of freedom? Typically, freedom is accompanied by an exploring spirit. Like your curiosity drives you to find the boundaries and test the boundaries, and you're constantly in this state of how do I constantly go into the outer fringes and figure out where this actually starts and ends. It's the way humans were actually designed from the very beginning, which is why we're all explorers. And so to do that takes time. And that's what I learned on my sabbatical, is like there's so much life that I am not in control of, I'm not living, because I'm sitting up in this shallow pool of water. It's 5 inches deep, and it might be 3 miles wide, but there's no sustenance here. There's no power here. It's only when that water is gathered into a body and the depth is presented that you have power. And this happens in every domain of life, whether it's work or relationships. When you're like, how's your marriage doing? Oh, it's great. We're shallow as can be. You're not winning. That doesn't sound like winning. How's your marriage? Oh, we're going to a deeper place. We're so connected. And we talk about everything. How is your life with your relationship with your kids, with your 5-year-old daughter? Great. We're just on the surface, man. That's not a good thing.
And everyone's desire is to be deeply in love.
Deeply.
Not highly, just deeply.
Yeah, 100%. Why? Because it's written into the human DNA. It's written into our code.
Mm-hmm.
Like we understand things. I think God is a lot simpler than we think, and business is a lot simpler than we think, and just living well is simpler than we think. It's written into us. Sometimes if we could just listen to our instincts for a second and stop overcomplicated and then second guessing it and, like over mathing everything, then we would be a lot further along, because we would just be like, why did you do that? And you're like, it just felt right. Like I felt it deep. I felt this is what I'm supposed to go. The Bible says this is the way, walk in it. It doesn't say this is the way proven by the algebraic equation of mathematics. It just says this is the way, and walk in it. The desires of our heart map to the desires of God's hearts. And whether someone's like, I said this too on the podcast that you didn't listen to, those people who do have power, they're not just Christians. I've been in rooms with Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists and all sorts of types of people who, we can fight about this if you want. They have more power than most Christians. They're tapped into something, like they're tapped into a deeper level. And even in like jiu-jitsu, I'm getting like literally beat up 3 times a week right now. It's amazing. The depth of your holds and the depth of your this is all correlated. It's all the same. Like whatever it is, if you can get to the deep places, then you transform and you get a measure of power in the high places. And anytime you get to a high place without first going deep, you'll be knocked off that high place. Anytime you accrue a level of success that you didn't first pay for in infrastructure, you'll have to give that success back. So it's very simple. If there are a lot of people who could be like, I'll teach you how to make a lot of money. Just run some ads, do the CVR and the CPMs and all of the marketing speak. But the problem is, like, I did that. And a whole group of people, I was able to get them to make a lot of money, and then they had to give it all back because there was no infrastructure there. They didn't go deep first. And so that's what this show is really ultimately about, is we're gonna tackle some of these topics and these issues that, like, if you can get to these places, and you'll feel it, because all of a sudden you'll just have a drive out of curiosity, not a drive that comes from fear or insecurity. If you the chip on the shoulder thing drives me crazy. If you're accomplishing great things from a chip off your shoulder, you are a slave. So enjoy slavery. And one day, when you want to be free, you'll eventually have to give it all back and recreate it from a place of health. And so I could save people a lot of time if we can start here on these topics. And God promotion doesn't have to be given back. God wealth doesn't have to be given back, like, because it's built on the infrastructure that comes from the foundations.
Wow. Yeah, my head's spinning right now.
You a fan?
Big fan.
Cool.
It's making me think of all the, so when I came into Sales Mentor, I was 19 years old, I never made more than $4,000 in a month.
Yeah.
And everyone on the team was like, you're going to make at least $15,000.
So much money.
Your first month being here. What did I do 1 month in? Bought my dream car. What in the heck? I'm looking back now, I'm like, what kind of decision was that?
Yeah.
And now that you're explaining it this way, I'm realizing, like, there was no infrastructure to have been worthy of the opportunity that I got. I basically cheated the system. I cheated it big time. And then it cost me, the cost for me came in relationships, it came in morals, it came in a lot of different things.
Yeah. There's 2 fights. There's the fight to take new ground. Back to the explorer concept. There's the fight to take the ground. And then there's the fight to settle it or keep it. So you go all the way back to, like, Alexander the Great. Why did Alexander the Great lose his empire? Because he couldn't hang on to it. His army was spread out across too many different places. He couldn't actually get the logistics working. Well, that's a principle. Even Alexander the Great is not exactly a biblical reference, but there's so many things we can learn from all of these different conquerors and explorers and people who have done things that we idolize. If you get something but you can't keep it, you might as well have never gotten it. So the secret there, if there is a linchpin, is really to focus on, am I worthy of hanging on to this new grounds that I'm taking? Because you can't just like take ground and not settle the grounds. You have to be able to actually live in the territory, defend and hang on to the territory, and ultimately produce great things out of the territory. So
It's good.
cool. That's all I got. I love you guys. See you next time.